The snow fell in thick, deliberate flakes across the city's financial district, each crystal catching the amber glow of streetlights like scattered diamonds on black velvet. James Sterling moved through the storm with predatory grace, his Italian leather shoes silent against the slush-covered sidewalk. The scent of winter, clean, sharp, metallic, filled his nostrils, but underneath it lingered something else. Something that made his ancient heart stutter in his chest. Desperation. Fear. The copper tang of approaching death. He'd walked these streets for 3 centuries, watching empires of glass and steel rise where once stood wooden shops and cobblestone. Tonight felt different. The very air hummed with electricity that had nothing to do with the storm brewing overhead. His supernatural senses, honed by decades of hunting, picked up the rapid flutter of human heartbeats nearby, too fast, too frantic, like birds trapped in a cage. James paused beneath a flickering streetlight, his breath forming no mist in the frigid air. The sounds of the city faded to a whisper as his hearing focused, zeroing in on voices carried by the wind. A woman's voice, soft but strained. A child's cough, wet and concerning. And beneath it all, the sluggish, irregular rhythm of a heart fighting to keep beating. He turned the corner into an alley, and the scent hit him like a physical blow. Not just desperation now, but something impossible. Something that shouldn't exist in this modern world of steel and glass. The smell of his own past, of ancient parchment and forgotten bloodlines, wrapped around him like a shroud. The cardboard shelter huddled against the brick wall looked like a child's fort, pathetic and temporary. But the family inside radiated warmth that had nothing to do with their meager fire. James felt his predatory instincts war with something deeper, something he'd thought dead for centuries. The woman, Sarah, his enhanced hearing caught her name, spoke in hushed tones to her children, her voice carrying the weight of a mother's love and a mother's terror. Then he saw it. The little girl, no more than 8, held up a piece of paper with the solemnity of a priest displaying Holy Scripture. "It's for my brother's heart surgery," she whispered to her mother, and James's world tilted on its axis. The drawing was crude, done in crayon and colored pencil, but the face staring back at him was unmistakable. His own features, rendered with the innocent accuracy that only children possessed, the sharp cheekbones, the aristocratic nose, the eyes that had seen empires fall. But it was more than just a portrait. The child had somehow captured something in those crayon strokes that photographers and painters had failed to achieve in 300 years. She'd drawn his soul. James stepped closer, his supernatural grace allowing him to approach without disturbing so much as a snowflake. The boy, William, lay still as death against his mother's chest, his breathing shallow and labored. But as James watched, something impossible happened. The child's eyes fluttered open, and for one heart-stopping moment, they glowed with an otherworldly light. Not dying. Turning. The realization hit James like a stake through the heart. This wasn't some random encounter, some twist of fate that had led him to this alley. The boy carried his blood, somehow, impossibly. The ancient magic that ran through his veins, the curse that had made him what he was, pulsed in recognition. 3 centuries of loneliness, of watching the world change while he remained frozen in time. And now this. A family. His family. Though he couldn't understand how or why. The drawing in the little girl's hands wasn't just art. It was a calling card from destiny itself. Sarah's voice broke through his stunned silence. "Please," she whispered to the empty air, not knowing he stood mere feet away. I don't know what else to do. He's so cold, and I can't. Her voice cracked, and James felt something inside his chest crack with it. The snow continued to fall, each flake a tiny frozen tear from heaven. The family's heartbeats filled his ears like a symphony. Sarah's steady and strong despite her fear, Mia's quick with childish anxiety, and William's was changing, slowing, becoming something other than human. James had spent centuries avoiding attachments, knowing that everything mortal withered and died while he endured. But looking at this family, at the drawing that somehow knew his face, at the boy who carried impossible traces of his own supernatural essence, he felt the weight of eternity shift. The wind picked up, howling through the alley like a banshee's wail. It carried with it the scents of the city, exhaust fumes, hot dog vendors, the ozone smell of approaching snow. But underneath it all was that persistent aroma of destiny, of paths converging after centuries of parallel lines. He could walk away, should walk away. Let nature take its course. Let the boy die as humans were meant to do. Let the family fade into the statistics of urban poverty. It would be easier, safer, the way he'd survived for 300 years. But the drawing in Mia's small hands seemed to pulse with life, and William's transformed heartbeat called to something primal in James's supernatural nature. This wasn't chance. This was completion. Sarah. His voice cut through the storm like a blade through silk, cultured and precise. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock at finding a stranger in their private sanctuary. But there was no fear in her gaze, only desperate hope. You know my name. It wasn't a question. Sarah's voice carried the weight of a woman who had run out of surprises, who had moved beyond shock into a realm of pure survival instinct. I know many things. James stepped into the weak circle of light cast by their small fire, letting them see him clearly for the first time. Sarah's breath caught, and Mia's eyes went wide as she looked from her drawing to his face and back again. You're him, Mia whispered, holding up the paper with trembling fingers. You're the man from my dreams. The words hit James like a physical blow. Dreams, of course. The bloodline connection wouldn't just manifest physically. It would create psychic bridges, ancestral memories bleeding through in the form of childhood visions. The girl had been drawing him not from imagination, but from inherited memory. Your brother, James said, his voice gentler than it had been in decades. He's not dying. He's changing. Sarah's arms tightened around William protectively. I don't understand. You don't need to understand. You need to trust. James extended his hand, palm up, in the universal gesture of offering aid. I can save him. I can save all of you. But we need to leave. Now. The snow swirled around them like a living thing, and in the distance, James's supernatural hearing picked up the sound of approaching sirens. Not for them, but close enough to matter. The city was waking up around them, and this moment of possibility would fade with the dawn. Who are you? Sarah asked, though her grip on William was already loosening, hope beginning to override caution. Someone who's been alone for a very long time, James replied, and the honesty in his voice surprised even him. Someone who's been waiting for you without knowing it. The limousine waited at the mouth of the alley, its engine purring like a contented predator. James had summoned it with a thought, one of the many conveniences that came with supernatural power and centuries of accumulated wealth. The warm, golden light spilling from its windows looked like salvation itself against the harsh white of the storm. Sarah looked at her children, Mia clutching the drawing like a talisman, William's breathing growing more labored by the minute. And James saw the exact moment she made her choice. It was written in the set of her shoulders, the lift of her chin, the way her eyes met his without flinching. "Will you hurt us?" she asked. "Never." The word came out with such conviction that it surprised them both. James had made many promises over the centuries, most of them lies designed to serve his purposes. This felt different. This felt like an oath sworn before God himself. Sarah nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Then we'll come." James moved with inhuman speed and grace, scooping William into his arms while Sarah gathered their few possessions. The boy was lighter than he should have been, his body already beginning the transformation that would either save or damn him. His skin was fever-hot against James's perpetually cold flesh, and the scent of changing blood filled the vampire's nostrils with something dangerously close to hunger. Mia tucked the drawing carefully into her coat pocket, her small hand patting it to make sure it was secure. "Are you going to take care of us?" she asked, with the directness that only children possessed. "Yes," James said, and meant it with every fiber of his immortal being. The limousine's door opened at their approach, revealing an interior that was warm and luxurious beyond anything the family had experienced in months. Leather seats the color of rich cream, soft lighting that seemed to emanate from the very air itself, and most importantly, heat that wrapped around them like an embrace. James lifted them inside one by one, first Mia, then Sarah, finally settling William on the plush seat with careful reverence. The boy's eyes fluttered open again, and this time there was no mistaking the otherworldly light that flickered in their depths. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, as the warmth enveloped them. And James felt something twist in his chest at the simple gratitude in her voice. But as he slid into the seat across from them, Sarah's hand brushed against his in the confined space. Her eyes widened at the contact, and James saw the exact moment she registered what her touch had revealed. His skin was cold as winter marble, cold as death itself, cold as the grave he should have been resting in for the past 3 centuries. The limousine pulled away from the curb, carrying them into the night and toward a future none of them could have imagined. But in the warm, golden cocoon of the car's interior, with the family's heartbeats filling his supernatural senses and the impossible weight of destiny settling around his shoulders, James felt Sarah's questioning gaze burning into him like a brand. She knew. Maybe not what he was exactly, but she knew he wasn't human. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows and William's transformation accelerated in his arms, James realized that everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, Sarah's fingers still tingling from the contact with his marble-cold skin. James watched her face in the limousine's golden light, seeing the precise moment understanding flickered in her eyes. Not complete comprehension, but the dawning awareness that the man who had just saved them existed outside the realm of normal human experience. "You're not," she began, then stopped, her maternal instincts warring with curiosity. William stirred in her arms, his breathing shallow but steady, and she made the choice that mothers have made since time began. Her children's welfare trumped everything else. "It doesn't matter what you are. Just help him." The limousine glided through the storm-swept streets with supernatural smoothness, its heated interior a cocoon of luxury that felt almost obscene after the cardboard shelter. James studied the family with predatory intensity, his ancient senses cataloging every detail. Sarah's heartbeat had steadied into the rhythm of determined acceptance. Mia pressed her face against the window, watching the city lights blur past like fallen stars. And William's transformation was accelerating. The boy's fever spiked higher, his small body radiating heat that should have been impossible for someone so close to death. James could smell the change in his blood, the ancient magic that somehow flowed through the child's veins, responding to proximity to its source. But something was wrong. The process was happening too fast, too chaotically, like a symphony played at triple speed. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere I can help him properly." James leaned forward, his pale eyes fixed on William's flushed face. "Tell me about his illness. Everything. When it started. How it progressed." Sarah's hand smoothed over her son's fevered brow with practiced tenderness. "The doctors said it was a congenital heart defect. Something he was born with, but it didn't manifest until recently. His heart just stopped working properly. They said he needed surgery, but..." She gestured helplessly at their circumstances. "When exactly did the symptoms begin?" 3 months ago. He collapsed during recess at school. Just fell over like someone had cut his strings." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "The emergency room doctor said his heart was barely functioning, that we had maybe weeks. But he's lasted longer than they predicted. Almost like something was keeping him alive." Something was. James's jaw tightened as the pieces fell into place. The bloodline connection wasn't just manifesting. It was sustaining the boy, keeping his human heart beating while his supernatural nature tried to emerge. But the two forces were at war within his small body, and without intervention, both would fail. The limousine turned onto a tree-lined avenue where mansions sat like sleeping giants behind wrought iron gates. James's estate loomed ahead, a Gothic revival masterpiece that he'd called home for the better part of a century. Its windows glowed with warm light, and for the first time in decades, the sight of it didn't feel like a mausoleum. "Mia," he said softly, and the little girl turned from the window with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. "The drawing you made. Tell me about the dreams." She pulled the crumpled paper from her pocket, smoothing it carefully on her lap. "I see you in a big house with lots of books. You're sad because you're all alone. And there's something wrong with your reflection. Like it's not really there." Her small finger traced the crayon lines of his face. "You've been waiting for us for a really long time." The limousine stopped before the estate's main gate, which swung open at their approach with silent precision. Sarah's eyes widened as they drove up the circular drive, taking in the manicured gardens, the fountain that sparkled even in winter, the sheer impossible wealth of it all. "You live here?" she whispered. "For now." James helped them from the car, William's burning body light as a feather in his arms. "Mrs. Chen will show you to your rooms. There are clothes, food, whatever you need. But first, we need to get William stabilized." The front doors opened before they reached them, revealing a small Asian woman in her 60s, whose eyes held the same otherworldly awareness as James's. She bowed slightly, her movements precise and graceful. "The medical suite is prepared, Mr. Sterling," she said in accented English. "Dr. Reeves is standing by." James nodded, carrying William through halls lined with priceless art and antique furniture. Sarah and Mia followed in stunned silence, their footsteps muffled by Persian rugs that cost more than most people earned in a year. The medical suite occupied the mansion's east wing, a fully equipped hospital that James maintained for emergencies exactly like this one. Dr. Reeves was a thin, nervous man with prematurely gray hair and hands that shook slightly until he began working. He'd been on James's payroll for 15 years, asking no questions and maintaining absolute discretion about his employer's unusual requirements. "Get him on the monitors," James ordered, settling William on the examination table. The boy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and bright with fever. Full cardiac workup, blood chemistry, everything. The next hour passed in a blur of medical terminology and increasingly frantic activity. William's vital signs were impossible, his heart rate fluctuating wildly between dangerous bradycardia and tachycardia that should have killed him, his temperature spiking to levels that would cook a normal human brain. But somehow, impossibly, he clung to life. "I don't understand it," Dr. Reeves muttered, studying the readouts with growing confusion. His blood work shows massive cellular changes, like his entire genetic structure is rewriting itself. But that's impossible. James stood in the shadows, watching Sarah hold Mia close as they observed the medical team work. The little girl's drawing lay forgotten on a nearby chair, and every time James's gaze fell on it, he felt that same shock of recognition. How was this possible? How could this family exist? Checkpoint 1. 800 words. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Reeves called, his voice tight with professional concern. "I need to speak with you privately." James followed him to the corner of the room, noting how Sarah's attention sharpened despite her apparent focus on comforting Mia. The woman missed nothing. "His cellular structure is unlike anything I've ever seen," the doctor whispered. "It's almost like he's evolving. Into what, I can't say. But the process is accelerating, and I don't think conventional medicine can help him." "Continue monitoring him," James said quietly. "Do whatever you can to keep him comfortable." "Sir, with respect, I think we need to get him to a proper hospital. This is beyond my capabilities." "No, hospitals." James's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "He stays here. Continue your observations and report any changes immediately." Dr. Reeves nodded reluctantly and returned to his patient. James moved to where Sarah sat, noting how she tensed slightly at his approach. The woman's instincts were remarkably sharp. She recognized predator even when she couldn't name it. "The doctor seems concerned," she said carefully. "Dr. Reeves is cautious by nature. William is stronger than he appears." James settled into the chair beside her, hyper-aware of the space between them. "Your daughter's dreams, when did they start?" "Around the same time William got sick. She'd wake up crying, talking about the sad man in the big house. I thought it was just anxiety about her brother." Sarah's eyes searched his face. "But it was you, wasn't it? She was seeing you." Before James could answer, alarms began blaring from the medical equipment. William's body went rigid on the table, his back arching as if electricity coursed through him. The monitors showed his heart rate spiking to impossible levels, while his temperature climbed past 108 degrees Fahrenheit. "He's seizing!" Dr. Reeves shouted, reaching for emergency medications. James moved with inhuman speed, his hand closing over the doctor's wrist. "No, don't interfere." "Sir, he'll die." "He won't." James's eyes never left William's convulsing form. "This is part of the process." Sarah lunged toward the table, but James caught her gently, his cold hands a stark contrast to her fevered panic. "Let me go. He's my son. And he's going to be fine. But you have to trust me." James's voice held her as surely as his hands. What's happening to him isn't medical. It's something else entirely. The seizure lasted exactly 97 seconds. James counted each one while Sarah sobbed against his chest, and Mia pressed her face into her mother's shoulder. When it ended, William's breathing settled into a rhythm that was deeper, stronger than it had been since they'd found the family in the alley. "His vitals are stabilizing," Dr. Reeves reported, wonder creeping into his professional tone. "Temperature dropping, heart rate normalizing. I've never seen anything like it." James released Sarah, who immediately rushed to William's side. The boy's eyes opened, clearer than they'd been in months, and when he smiled at his mother, James saw the faint glimmer of fangs beginning to emerge. The transformation was taking hold. Checkpoint 2. 1,600 words. The revelation. "We need to move him to the main house," James announced, his decision crystallizing as he watched William's impossible recovery. "He'll be more comfortable there, and Mrs. Chen can help monitor him." The transfer took place with military precision. James had carried enough unconscious bodies over the centuries to make the process look effortless, though William's changing nature made his weight feel different, denser somehow, as if his bones were becoming something stronger than human calcium and marrow. The Master Suite's guest wing had been prepared with the efficiency that came from decades of Mrs. Chen's management. The rooms were sumptuous without being overwhelming. Silk wallpaper in warm golds and creams, furniture that managed to be both antique and comfortable, windows that looked out over gardens that would be spectacular once spring arrived. "This is too much," Sarah protested, as Mrs. Chen showed them the adjoining rooms. "We can't accept this." "You can, and you will," James replied with gentle firmness. "Your son needs constant monitoring, and this is the safest place for that to happen." William had been installed in the largest bedroom, surrounded by medical equipment that Dr. Reeves insisted on maintaining despite the boy's dramatic improvement. The monitors showed steady, strong vital signs, but James could smell the continuing changes in his blood, the ancient magic working its slow alchemy on human cells. "I'll stay with him tonight," Sarah announced, settling into the chair beside the bed with the determination of a mother who had already lost too much. "Mrs. Chen will bring you anything you need," James assured her. "Food, clothes, whatever you require." "What I require," Sarah said, her eyes meeting his with startling directness, "is the truth about what's happening to my son, about who you really are." The request hung in the air between them like a challenge. James had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of deflection, of giving humans just enough truth to satisfy their curiosity without revealing the full scope of what he was. But something about Sarah's unwavering gaze made his usual evasions feel inadequate. "Some truths are dangerous," he said finally. "More dangerous than watching my son almost die in an alley." Sarah's voice carried the steel that had kept her family together through months of homelessness. "More dangerous than accepting help from a stranger whose skin is cold as ice and who moves like he's not entirely human." Mia looked up from where she'd been arranging her few possessions on the ornate dresser. "He's not dangerous, Mama. Not to us. I can see it in the dreams." "What exactly do you see in these dreams?" James asked, crouching to bring himself to the child's eye level. "You're very old," Mia said matter-of-factly. "Older than the city, and you're tired of being alone. The house is full of beautiful things, but they don't make you happy because you don't have anyone to share them with." She tilted her head, studying his face with unsettling intensity. "You've been waiting for us your whole life, even though you didn't know it." The simple honesty of her words hit James like a physical blow. Out of the mouths of babes came truths that centuries of philosophy had failed to illuminate. He had been waiting, hadn't he? Accumulating wealth and power and beautiful objects to fill the void where connection should have been. Mia, sweetie, why don't you get ready for bed? Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. It's been a very long day. The little girl nodded and padded toward the bathroom, but not before pressing her drawing into James's hands. So you don't forget what you look like when you smile, she said solemnly. When they were alone except for William's sleeping form, Sarah fixed James with a look that demanded answers. My daughter dreams about you. My son is going through some kind of impossible medical transformation. And you... She gestured at his perfectly still form, the way he never seemed to breathe, the unnatural pallor of his skin. You're not human, are you? The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility and danger. James could lie, could craft some elaborate explanation that would satisfy her human need for rational answers. Or he could tell her the truth and watch her flee in terror, taking the children with her and leaving him alone again. But as he looked at William's peaceful face, at the way the boy's breathing had finally settled into the rhythm of true rest, James realized that lies would serve no one. Not anymore. No, he said simply. I'm not human. I haven't been for a very long time. Sarah's face went pale, but she didn't flinch. What are you? Something that shouldn't exist in your world of science and reason. Something that belongs to older, darker stories. James moved to the window, staring out at his gardens where moonlight painted everything silver. I'm what your ancestors called vampire, though the reality is more complex than the legends suggest. He waited for the scream, the denial, the inevitable flight toward the door. Instead, Sarah's voice came quiet and thoughtful. That's why your skin is so cold. Why I never see you breathe. Why you move like gravity doesn't quite apply to you. She paused, processing. And why you can help William when human medicine fails. James turned, surprised by her calm acceptance. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, Sarah admitted. But not of you. I'm afraid for my son, for what's happening to him. And I'm afraid that if I run now, if I let fear make my decisions, he'll die. He won't die, James said with quiet certainty. But he is changing into something like me. How is that possible? I don't know. The admission felt strange on his tongue. James Sterling was accustomed to having answers, to understanding the supernatural forces that shaped his existence. There's a connection between us, between your family and me. Something that shouldn't exist, but does. Sarah stood and moved to the window beside him, careful to maintain distance while still showing she wasn't fleeing. The drawing. Mia's never seen you before tonight, but she drew your face perfectly. Ancestral memory, perhaps, or something deeper? James pulled the crumpled paper from his pocket, studying the crayon portrait that had started this impossible evening. There are bloodlines that carry traces of supernatural heritage, usually dormant, but sometimes they wake up. Yes. They stood in silence, watching the snow continue to fall beyond the glass. William's breathing filled the room with its steady rhythm, and for a moment, the scene felt almost domestic, almost normal. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now we wait. We watch. We see what William becomes. James folded the drawing carefully, treating it with the reverence usually reserved for holy relics. And we hope that whatever force brought us together has a plan, because I'm flying blind here. Sarah's laugh was soft and slightly hysterical. A 300-year-old vampire is flying blind. That's actually not as comforting as you might think. 307, James corrected automatically, then caught himself. And you're right. It's not comforting at all. But as he watched Sarah return to her vigil beside William's bed, as he listened to the steady rhythm of their heartbeats filling his ancient house with life, James felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Not comfort, exactly, but something close to it. Something that might, given time, grow into the peace he'd thought lost forever. Checkpoint 3, 2,300 words. The next 3 days passed in a strange suspension of normalcy. William's condition continued to stabilize, though Dr. Reeves grew increasingly frustrated with blood work that defied every medical principle he'd learned in 30 years of practice. The boy's cellular structure was rewriting itself at the molecular level, becoming something that was neither fully human nor entirely other. James found himself drawn to the family with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He would stand in doorways watching Sarah read to Mia, or observe William's sleeping face for signs of change. The house, which had felt like a mausoleum for decades, suddenly hummed with life. Mrs. Chen smiled more often. The rooms seemed brighter. Even the antique furniture looked less like museum pieces and more like a home. But it was the small moments that undid him completely. Mia's delighted laughter when she discovered the library, with its rolling ladders and first edition volumes. Sarah's quiet tears of relief when William sat up and asked for soup. The way the boy's eyes followed him with growing awareness, as if recognizing something familiar in James's otherworldly features. On the fourth morning, James woke from his daylight rest to find Mia sitting in his study, carefully copying illustrations from a leather-bound bestiary that was older than most nations. "You're awake?" she said, without looking up from her drawing. "Mrs. Chen said you sleep during the day because of what you are." "Mrs. Chen talks too much," James replied, though without real irritation. He settled into the chair across from her, noting how the afternoon, sun streaming through the windows, felt warm rather than threatening. Another impossibility to add to the growing list. "Are you going to hurt us?" Mia asked, with the directness that only children possessed. "No, never." "Are you going to leave us?" The question hit him like a stake through the heart. "Do you want me to?" Mia finally looked up from her drawing, her young face serious. "Mama's scared you will. She thinks once William gets better, you'll send us away because we're not your real family." Real family. The words echoed in James's mind as he studied the child's earnest face. What made a family real? Blood, time. The simple decision to care for one another despite impossible circumstances. "Your mother is a wise woman to be cautious," he said carefully. "But she's wrong about this. You are my family now, in every way that matters." Mia nodded, as if this confirmed something she already knew. "Good, because William's going to need you when he wakes up properly." "What do you mean?" "He's different now. I can see it in the dreams. He's like you, but also like us. Something new." She held up her drawing, a perfect reproduction of an illustration showing a figure that was neither fully human nor entirely monstrous. He's going to be scared when he realizes what he's becoming. Before James could respond, Sarah's voice cut through the house like a blade. "James, come quickly!" He moved with supernatural speed, reaching William's room in seconds. Sarah stood beside the bed, her face pale with shock, staring at something that shouldn't have been possible. William was awake, sitting up in bed with perfect posture and eyes that glowed with soft amber light. But that wasn't what had terrified his mother. It was the mirror. The ornate antique mirror that hung opposite the bed reflected everything in the room with perfect clarity. The medical equipment, the silk wallpaper, Sarah's frightened face, the rumpled bedsheets, everything except William. The boy cast no reflection. "Mama?" William's voice was different, clearer, with an odd harmonic quality that seemed to resonate in the bones. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Sarah's eyes darted between her son and the mirror, then fixed on James with dawning understanding. "He's like you now, isn't he? Completely like you." James moved to the window, where the late afternoon sun slanted through the glass in golden bars. Without hesitation, he stepped into the light, letting it wash over him. Sarah gasped as the sunbeams passed through him as if he were made of mist, casting no shadow on the floor behind him. "The legends got some things wrong," he said quietly. "Sunlight doesn't burn us, but it does reveal what we truly are, creatures that exist between the world of the living and the dead." William looked down at his hands, flexing fingers that moved with inhuman grace. "I feel different, stronger, like I could run forever and never get tired." He looked up at James with eyes that held centuries of knowledge despite belonging to a child. "This is what you are, what I'm becoming." "Yes." "Will I hurt people? Will I want to drink blood?" The question hung in the air like a sword. James had spent 3 centuries learning to control his darker impulses, to find sustenance without taking lives. But William was just a child, and the hunger that came with their nature was not easily denied. "You'll want to," James said honestly. "But wanting and doing are different things. I'll teach you control. I'll teach you everything you need to know." Sarah moved to her son's side, her maternal instincts overriding her fear. "Baby, how do you feel? Are you in pain?" "I feel perfect," William said, wonder creeping into his voice. "Like I was broken before and now I'm fixed. But different fixed, not normal fixed." "You're not normal," James confirmed. "You never will be again. But you're not broken either. You're something new. Something that bridges the gap between human and vampire." Dr. Reeves chose that moment to enter the room, tablet in hand and medical concerns on his mind. He stopped dead in the doorway, his gaze taking in the scene. William sitting up with impossible vitality, the empty mirror, James standing translucent in the afternoon sunlight. "Dear God," the doctor whispered, his tablet clattering to the floor. James moved with inhuman speed, his hand closing gently but firmly on Dr. Reeves's shoulder. "Doctor, I think we need to have a conversation about patient confidentiality, a very serious conversation." But even as he dealt with the immediate crisis of discovery, James's attention remained fixed on the family that had transformed his existence. Sarah's hand rested protectively on William's shoulder, her love unchanged despite the impossibility of their situation. Mia appeared in the doorway, unsurprised by the supernatural tableau before her. "Is he fully changed now?" she asked with the calm acceptance of a child who had seen the truth in dreams. "Almost," James replied, noting how William's heartbeat had slowed to match his own supernatural rhythm. "There's one more stage." As if summoned by his words, the medical monitors began to alarm. But this time, the readings were different. William's heart rate was dropping, not into distress, but into something else entirely. The rhythm grew slower, more deliberate, until it matched the ancient cadence that had sustained James for over 3 centuries. Then, with a sound like a sigh, it stopped. The flatline tone filled the room with its electronic keen, but William remained sitting upright, his eyes bright with otherworldly awareness. He was no longer breathing, no longer bound by the biological imperatives that governed human life. He had crossed over completely. "The transformation is complete," James said, his voice heavy with the weight of what this meant. "He's fully vampire now." Sarah's face went white, but before she could speak, William moved. Not with the careful deliberation of a sick child, but with the fluid grace of a predator. He was off the bed and across the room in a heartbeat, his small hands pressed against the window glass with strength that should have shattered it. "I can hear everything," he whispered in wonder. "Every heartbeat in the house, every breath, every whisper of wind through the trees." His head turned toward his family, with eyes that now glowed like amber stars. "And I'm so hungry." James moved to the door with inhuman speed, his hand finding the lock. The click echoed through the room like a gunshot. "James?" Sarah's voice was tight with new fear. "What are you doing?" "Protecting you," he replied, though his eyes never left William's transformed figure. "The first hunger is the strongest, and he doesn't know how to control it yet." The monitor continued its flatline wail, but William was very much alive, more alive than he'd ever been. And as James watched the boy's nostrils flare, scenting the blood of his human family, he realized that saving them might have doomed them all. The lock clicked into place, sealing them all inside with a newly made vampire whose hunger was just beginning to wake. The lock clicked into place, but William was already moving. Not toward his family, toward the IV stand that Dr. Reeves had abandoned in his shock. The boy's newly sharpened teeth bit through the plastic tubing with surgical precision, and James watched in fascination as William's tongue sought the residual traces of saline solution, mixed with something else. Something red. "The blood samples," James realized, his voice cutting through Sarah's rising panic. "He can smell them." William's head snapped up, amber eyes fixing on the medical cart where vials of his own blood sat waiting for analysis. But these weren't the samples Dr. Reeves had drawn days ago. These were different, darker, changed. "I need—" William's voice cracked, the words coming out in a growl that belonged to no 8-year-old child. I know what you need," James said, moving slowly toward the transformed boy. "But not from them. Never from them." Sarah pressed Mia behind her, maternal instinct overriding the impossibility of their situation. "James, he's looking at us like we're—" "Food," James finished grimly. "Because right now, that's exactly what you are to him. The hunger doesn't distinguish between family and prey. Not at first." Dr. Reeves had backed against the wall, his medical training warring with the evidence of his own eyes. "This is impossible. Hearts don't just stop and leave the patient conscious. People don't." "People don't," James agreed, his attention split between William's predatory stillness and the doctor's growing hysteria. "But William isn't people anymore." The boy moved again, this time toward his mother with the fluid grace of something that had never known the limitations of human joints and muscles. Sarah stood her ground, though James could hear her heartbeat hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. "William," she said firmly, using the voice that had gotten him through homework and bedtime stories and the long nights when his human heart had struggled to keep beating. "Look at me. Really look at me." For a moment, the amber glow in William's eyes flickered. The predator paused, and the child surfaced like a swimmer breaking through dark water. "Mama?" The word came out broken, confused. "I'm so hungry, but not for food, for something else, something warm and red and—" His small hands flew to his mouth, covering the fangs that had emerged fully formed. "What's happening to me?" James moved with careful deliberation, positioning himself between William and his family without making it obvious. "What's happening is that you're becoming what you were always meant to be. But the hunger, that's the hardest part to learn to control." "I don't want to hurt them," William whispered, his voice muffled by his hands. "But I can hear their hearts beating and it sounds like dinner bells." "Then we fix that," James said simply. "Right now." He moved to the medical cart, his fingers closing around one of the blood bags that Dr. Reeves kept for emergencies. The plastic crinkled as he tore it open, the scent of type O negative filling the room with metallic sweetness. William's head snapped up, his nostrils flaring. The predator was back, but this time it had a target that wasn't his family. "Drink," James commanded, holding out the bag. "Learn what sustenance feels like without taking life." William moved like lightning, his small hands closing around the blood bag with desperate hunger. The first taste hit his system like an electric shock, and James watched the transformation complete itself in real time. The amber glow in William's eyes steadied. His breathing, unnecessary now but still habitual, settled into a rhythm that matched James's own supernatural cadence. "Better?" James asked. William nodded, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Much better. But also different. Like I can think clearly for the first time since I woke up." "The hunger clouds everything until you learn to manage it," James explained, noting how Sarah had relaxed slightly, now that her son was no longer looking at her like prey. "It will always be there, but it doesn't have to control you." Dr. Reeves chose that moment to make a break for the door, his hand closing around the handle before he remembered that James had locked it. The sound of his frustrated rattling filled the room. "Let me out," he demanded, his voice pitched high with panic. "I won't tell anyone what I've seen. I'll sign whatever confidentiality agreement you want. Just let me leave." James studied the doctor with predatory consideration. Dr. Reeves had served him faithfully for 15 years, asking no questions and maintaining absolute discretion. But this was different. This was a line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. "I'm afraid that's not possible," James said quietly. "You've seen too much. You know too much." "James," Sarah's voice carried a warning. "He helped William. He tried to save him. And I'm grateful for that. But gratitude doesn't change the reality of our situation." James moved toward the doctor with the fluid grace that marked his supernatural nature. "Dr. Reeves, you have two choices. You can become part of this family, permanently, or—" He let the alternative hang unspoken in the air. "You're talking about killing me," Dr. Reeves whispered. "I'm talking about protecting my family," James corrected. "By whatever means necessary." William looked up from the empty blood bag, his young face troubled. "You don't have to kill him. I can smell his intentions. He's scared, but he's not planning to betray us." James paused, struck by the boy's certainty. "How can you tell?" "Fear smells different from deception, and his fear is clean, just terror at what he's witnessed, not anger or plans for revenge." William tilted his head, studying the doctor with newly supernatural senses. "He's actually more curious than frightened now." Dr. Reeves blinked, seeming surprised by his own reaction. "The boy's right. I should be running, screaming, calling the authorities. But instead, I keep thinking about the medical implications. The cellular regeneration I witnessed. The way his heart stopped but his brain function remained perfect. He looked at James with growing fascination. How long have you been like this? What other physiological changes occur during the transformation? Are there others? 15 years you've worked for me, James said slowly. And you've never asked questions about my unusual requirements. The blood deliveries, the medical equipment, the patients who came in dying and left different. I assumed you were running some kind of experimental treatment program. Gene therapy, maybe, or stem cell research. I never imagined. Dr. Reeves gestured helplessly at William, who was examining his own reflection, or lack thereof, in the medical equipment's chrome surfaces. You never imagined vampires were real, James finished. And now that you know? Now I want to understand how it works. The transformation process. The cellular changes. The way William's body died but his consciousness remained intact. Dr. Reeves's scientific curiosity was overriding his fear. This could revolutionize our understanding of death itself. Sarah stepped forward, her protective instincts still sharp despite the supernatural turn their lives had taken. You want to study my son like a lab rat. I want to understand him, Dr. Reeves corrected, to help him navigate what he's become. The medical challenges he'll face as something that's neither fully human nor entirely other. James considered this, weighing the doctor's genuine fascination against the risks of exposure. Dr. Reeves had kept his secrets for 15 years, and William would need medical support as he learned to control his new nature. If you stay, James said finally, there's no going back. You become part of this family, with all the responsibilities and dangers that entails. You help us protect William and his transformation. And you never, ever speak of this to anyone outside these walls. And if I try to leave? James's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Then you don't. Dr. Reeves swallowed hard, but his nod was steady. I understand, and I accept. Mia, who had been unusually quiet during the confrontation, tugged on James's sleeve. He's telling the truth. I can see it in his colors. Colors. James crouched to her level, intrigued. Everyone has colors around them. Mama's are warm gold when she's happy, red when she's scared. William's used to be all muddy and dim, but now they're bright silver and blue. She looked at Dr. Reeves with her unnaturally perceptive gaze. His are green and purple, curious and loyal. He won't betray us. James stared at the child, adding yet another impossibility to their growing collection. You can see auras. Is that what they're called? Mia shrugged as if supernatural sight was perfectly normal. I thought everyone could see them. Not everyone, James said softly. Very few people, in fact. Sarah moved to her daughter's side, her hand resting protectively on Mia's shoulder. Is she going to change too? Like William? I don't think so, James replied, studying Mia's bright human eyes. Her gift is different. Older, perhaps. Something that runs in bloodlines but doesn't require transformation to manifest. William had been listening to this exchange with growing awareness, his supernatural hearing picking up nuances that human ears would miss. We're all connected, aren't we? Not just by what happened tonight, but by something deeper. Yes, James said, the certainty settling in his bones like truth. Your family carries traces of very old magic, bloodline gifts that have been dormant for generations. And you? Sarah asked. What's your connection to us? James pulled Mia's drawing from his pocket, the crayon portrait that had started this impossible journey. I think I've been waiting for you for 3 centuries without knowing it, accumulating wealth and power and beautiful things to fill a void I didn't understand. He looked at each of them in turn. Sarah with her fierce maternal strength, Mia with her otherworldly perception, William with his newfound supernatural nature. But the void was never meant to be filled with objects. It was meant to be filled with family. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and promise. Family. Not bound by blood alone, but by choice and circumstance and the strange magic that had brought them together on a snowy night when all seemed lost. "So what happens now?" Sarah asked, echoing her question from days earlier. "Now we learn," James replied. "William learns to control his new nature. Mia learns to understand her gift. You learn to navigate a world where the impossible is everyday reality." He moved to the window, where the last light of day was fading into dusk. "And I learn what it means to be part of a family again." Dr. Reeves cleared his throat, his scientific mind already working through the implications. "William will need regular monitoring as his body completes the transformation. Blood work, neurological assessments, cardiovascular function studies." "No more blood work," William said firmly. "I can feel what my body needs now. It's like having a compass inside my chest, pointing toward what will keep me healthy and strong." "The supernatural equivalent of homeostasis," Dr. Reeves murmured, making mental notes. "Fascinating." Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway as if summoned, her timing impeccable as always. "Dinner is served in the main dining room," she announced, then paused, taking in the scene with her usual unflappable calm. "Should I prepare something special for Master William?" "He's already eaten," James replied, noting how naturally she'd adapted to their expanded family. "But yes, we'll need to make arrangements for his dietary requirements." "Of course, sir. I'll speak with our usual suppliers about increasing the medical deliveries." Sarah stared at the housekeeper's matter-of-fact acceptance of their supernatural situation. "Does everyone in this house know about—" "Mrs. Chen has been with me for 23 years, James explained. "She's seen stranger things than a newly turned vampire child." "Much stranger," Mrs. Chen confirmed with a slight smile. "Dinner will be ready when you are." As the housekeeper departed, James felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't experienced in centuries. Not just contentment, but a sense of rightness, as if the universe had finally clicked into proper alignment. William moved to his mother's side, his supernatural grace already becoming natural. "I'm still me, Mama. Different, but still me." Sarah pulled him into a hug that was fierce with relief and love. "I know, baby. I know." "And I won't hurt you," William added, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "James will teach me control, and I'll learn to be what I am without losing who I am." "We all will," Mia said with the wisdom of a child who saw too much. "We'll learn together." James watched this reunion with something approaching awe. 3 days ago, he'd been a solitary creature existing in the shadows between life and death. Now he stood in a room filled with the heartbeats of people who had chosen to trust him with their lives, their futures, their impossible transformations. "Come," he said, moving toward the door. "Mrs. Chen's dinners are not to be missed, and we have a lot to discuss about your new lives here." As they left the medical suite behind, James caught sight of their reflection in the hallway mirrors, Sarah and Mia walking together, Dr. Reeves trailing behind with his tablet and his questions, and the empty space where William should have been, but wasn't. But instead of feeling unsettled by the absence, James found it strangely comforting. William's missing reflection was proof of his transformation, evidence that he'd crossed over completely into the supernatural realm where James had dwelt alone for so long. Now neither of them would be alone. The dining room glowed with candlelight and crystal, the long mahogany table set for 6. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself. Roast beef and potatoes for the humans, warmed blood in a crystal decanter for the vampires, and flowers from the greenhouse to make everything feel celebratory rather than clinical. "This is beautiful," Sarah breathed, taking in the formal elegance of the room. "This is home," James corrected, pulling out her chair with old-world courtesy. "Your home, for as long as you want it." As they settled around the table, James felt the last of his ancient loneliness drain away like water from a broken vessel. The house that had echoed with emptiness for decades now rang with conversation and laughter. Mia peppered Dr. Reeves with questions about his medical equipment. William experimented with his enhanced senses, describing flavors and scents that only supernatural perception could detect. Sarah watched her children with the fierce love that had kept their family together through homelessness and desperation. And James watched them all, memorizing every detail of this moment when his solitary existence transformed into something larger, warmer, infinitely more complex. Outside, snow continued to fall just as it had on the night he'd found them in that alley. But now the cold held no threat, the darkness no loneliness. The storm that had brought them together was passing, leaving behind something new and strange and wonderful. James raised his crystal glass, the warmed blood within catching the candlelight like liquid rubies. "To family," he said simply. "To family," they echoed, human voices and vampire harmonizing in perfect accord. And as the toast settled into comfortable conversation, as William learned to navigate his new nature, and Mia shared her otherworldly perceptions, as Sarah began to believe that their long struggle for survival had finally ended in safety and belonging, James felt something he thought he'd lost forever. He felt the warmth of snow falling on his face, not the bitter cold of isolation, but the gentle promise of renewal. The same snow that had driven them together now blessed their union, transforming from harbinger of death into herald of new life. In the candlelit dining room of his ancient mansion, surrounded by the impossible family that had chosen to trust him with their transformed lives, James Sterling finally understood what it meant to come home.